When I was in college, one of the jobs I had my sophomore year during the summer was a teaching fellow at Harvard. One of the professors I worked for at BC was teaching there over the summer, and he asked me if I would be one of his teaching fellows. There were 10 of us. But I also worked some other jobs while I was there. So the way the class ran was all of us would be in the room with him, so we knew what he had taught that week. And so if questions came up, we'd be able to know exactly how he presented the material and what he was trying to help them to understand with those particular issues. Well, the course he was teaching was a computer language called BASIC, which, well, is pretty basic. It's something I had learned when I was a senior in high school. So we're in the classroom. There's one of these big auditorium classrooms that can fit like 200 or 300 people in it. And what he would do is all the lights would go off and the projector would go on and he would start teaching. Well, this particular day, I had not had any sleep. I had been up, honestly, for a little over 24 hours. And the classroom, the air conditioning wasn't working well, so the classroom was a little bit warm. The lights went off. He started teaching, something I knew like the back of my hand. I was really tired. It was warm, dark, and yes, I fell asleep. Even worse than that, because of the position I was sitting in, I did something I don't normally do. I started snoring. Of course, unfortunately, one of the guys I worked with who was sitting right next to me couldn't wake me up because he was laughing too hard. He just found it really funny. And what actually woke me up was the professor stopped talking and just started staring at me. The lack of noise actually woke me up. I noticed the guy next to me laughing, and eventually he leaned over and said, "You fell asleep," and started snoring. Of course, I was completely embarrassed. After class, I went up, I apologized to the professor, and I explained to him, what had happened, that I had been working all night at another job, and that was no excuse, but I shouldn't have fallen asleep. Fortunately, he was very understanding. And just simply said, don't let it happen again. How often that can happen in our lives, not that you fall asleep in a class, but simply that we do. We fall asleep. We fall asleep on what it is God is trying to teach us. We fall asleep on what it is God is calling us to do. We have a perfect example of that in the scriptures. Jesus asks the apostles to stay awake with him just for 1 hour while he goes off to pray because he's struggling and he needs their support and their companionship. And of course, what happens? Kind of like me, they had had a long night. They were really tired. And they fell asleep. We can fall asleep on God in so many different ways in our lives. It can happen by choosing to do the wrong thing. I mean, that is so simple a case, break one of the 10 commandments. And we do that really in a sense by falling asleep to our conscience. Our conscience is usually telling us, don't do this. This is wrong. And we choose to do it anyway. Or we can fall asleep when we're not doing the positive thing. That's what happened to the apostles. They were supposed to stay awake, give support and comfort to Jesus. And how often do we choose not to do the right thing? Maybe it's allowing the person to cut us off and not getting angry with them. Maybe it's choosing not to pass along some gossip we've heard. Maybe it's about giving that helping hand that we know is needed, but we decide we're too busy. There's something else more important going on. There's something else I need to be doing. Even though a part of us knows that God is calling us to do just what we need to be doing. But we fall asleep. We basically can go through life sleepwalking. It looks like we're doing things that are right or good, but we're not really trying to pay attention to the Lord. He can ask us very directly, and yet we find a reason why we can't do it, or why it's okay to do it. Every time we choose to sin, in a real sense, we're falling asleep on God. How do we stay awake? Well, it's really simple. It is essentially about trying to truly embrace our faith. It's about recognizing that our faith is not just about not doing the wrong thing. It's also about doing the positive thing. It's about seeking to do all the things Jesus tells us to do, and not just thinking they're for someone else. It's about the willingness to turn the other cheek. It's about our willingness to feed the hungry, clothe the poor, to visit the sick, to comfort those who mourn. It's the willingness to put ourselves out there in ways that are really uncomfortable. It's about being willing to trust when the Lord calls us to do things that, well, don't make a whole lot of sense. Because of much of what Christ taught in the world doesn't make any sense. But in faith, it really makes perfect sense. Let us then seek to truly stay awake. Let us seek to live our life in that radical way that Christ calls us to, because true Christianity is radical. It's a radical openness to the will of God. It's a radical openness to embrace our faith in its fullness. It's a radical openness to see God in each person before us, and to really seek to serve them as Christ has come to serve us by dying and rising. That's the radicalness of our faith. The cross. Yes, it's easy to find reasons to simply fall asleep. Let us choose to take the difficult route. Let us choose to stay awake and truly embrace our faith and radically follow Christ, embracing the cross and seeking to follow the will of God in all things. God bless.